Ladies and gentlemen, the appointment of Colin Powell as the new US Secretary of State in George W. Bush's administration appears to have been well received on all sides. First of all, the former Chief of Staff, the veteran of the Gulf War, had no trouble being confirmed in the mandatory hearings in the US Senate. And secondly, his appointment has been welcomed in Europe, where he is well known not only as a military leader, but also as a moderate compared to some of the hawks in George Bush's administration. And he's also known as a Europhile. Again, unlike a lot of the remaining appointees in George Bush's administration, who seem to have their minds tuned in to different parts of the world. And thirdly, his appointment has been well received by the staff of the State Department itself. I don't know whether they didn't like their former boss, Madeleine Albright, but apparently they're very enthusiastic about Colin. This is partly because of the new style he's adopted, but much more about what he's been saying to them in the very short period in which he's been able to get to know his staff. He made a speech to the assembled staff saying that he was not only going to be the president's foreign policy advisor and also serve the American people, but he was coming in as the leader and manager of the State Department. In other words, he's actually interested in the department itself and its staff, and not just in his own career or power. You might say it's a typical general's style. Leadership is what he's offering to his staff, but at the same time, if you want your army to back you, you have to ensure that their morale is good, and you have to ensure that you get loyalty, which is not that obvious in a non-military context. So what is he actually going to try to do for his department? Well, first of all, he intends to restore internal cohesion in a department which has been neglected by the three previous incumbents. And secondly, he would like to try and reverse the decline in the department's influence in Washington. Let's take, first of all, the internal cohesion point, if you like, the morale of the staff. The first thing that Colin Powell has tried to do is to get a bigger budget for the State Department. He spent most of the inauguration day chasing various White House staff, trying to get precisely that, a bigger budget. The second thing he will probably do is reduce the number of political appointments to key ambassadorial posts. This will leave more scope for in-house promotion and mean that presidents might find it more difficult now to appoint their own favourites to the plum ambassadorship posts abroad. Previous presidents have often appointed people who actually supported them financially during their electoral campaigns. And this, of course, will end if ambassadors are appointed according to their appropriateness for the job and their expertise. Without saying anything more about the changes that Colin Powell hopes to bring about in terms of the internal running of the State Department, let's see how he intends to increase the influence of the State Department. You may well say, well, surely the State Department is very influential in policy making. Well, not nearly as much so as it was just a few decades ago, when it certainly had the ear of the President for all foreign policy decisions. More recently, however, a lot of American foreign policy has become intertwined with international economic policy, which has meant that presidents have often called in special advisors who have the expertise in international economic affairs to advise them about how to deal with international policy issues. Also, there have been a series of international financial crises, which has meant that very often the president has turned more to the Treasury rather than the State Department for advice. So what can be done about that? Well, Colin Powell has started doing two things here. First of all, it appears that he spent more time in the Treasury than in the State Department during this period of a few weeks between President Bush's election and then his official confirmation. So Colin Powell is obviously trying to build up alliances, to coin another military term, in what is a very important department alongside his. That's one way of ensuring that the State Department is not left out, because they will have good contacts with the Treasury. And the other thing he intends to do is to beef up the economic expertise of the people working in the State Department itself, so that when the president is looking for advice, particularly on an international economic issue, he will know that he will find the right people in the State Department itself. So, Colin Powell has a lot of ideas. He may well have a fight on his hands to reverse the tide, but fighting, after all, is Colin Powell's stock in trade. Thank you.